In order to render our animation, we need to do a couple things, okay, a couple important steps. So first of all is this timeline. I've got a bouncing ball animation, and I've got on my timeline all of my keyframes. And at the end of the keyframes, I want it to end. I want the animation to end. But if I render it how it is now, it's going to render all of these frames all the way to 250. That's default. And I don't want it to render 150 blank frames. So I want it to end. My animation ends here, my last keyframe. I extend that by a few frames beyond, just so it doesn't cut right off on the video. So maybe about 75 frames. So right here it ends at 250. I'm going to click right there and type 75 and enter, and it takes away all those blank frames down to 75. So that's going to be my animation. So make sure that it is cut off in the right spot. Leave a few frames at the end for the video to stop. And after you've got that done, come over here to our tabs and go to the render tab, the camera. Now, normally we render this way with this button, or F12, and that renders an image, one frame at a time. But we want to render all the frames, so we're going to do this animation button. But before we click that, we need to come down to the bottom under the output section, and if you don't see the options there, you need to click it. You should see them though. And we need to change a couple things here. First of all, the file location. It's in this temporary folder. If you start rendering, it's going to start saving right away, and we don't want it in that temporary folder. We'll never be able to find it. So click right here, or click over here on the side of it, and it brings up our folder system. And so you'll go to find your 3D graphics folder. I'll put mine in animation. And if you want to make a new folder because you have 500 files here, then you can click this button right here, create new directory, and name it animation. And then name your file whatever you want to name it. Mine would be ball bounce. It could be whatever project you're doing at the time. And then click accept here. So when you do that, it gives you the new file location here, and you can see that there. Now, if you render now, it will save to that location, but it will save it as a bunch of pictures. Every frame will be a picture, and then you have to find something to do with all those pictures. So we want to change this from PNG. We want to save it to AVI JPEG. AVI is a video format, file format, and then JPEG is a compressed format, so it's going to make it a lot smaller. Don't do AVI RAW unless it's an amazing animation that you want to hand in somewhere to some film festival, because that will make the file size really huge. So we'll do AVI JPEG, and once we've got those two settings already, then we'll come up here and click this animation button, and as soon as we click that, it starts rendering frame by frame. So up here we can see what frame it's on. My animation starts moving, and it goes frame by frame. So depending on how big your animation is, it will take a long time or a short time. But as soon as you start rendering, it starts saving to that file location. So that's why you got to make sure it's all set up before you start rendering. It's different than an image. The other thing is if you're doing cycles render, you need to be careful of how many samples you use. So if in this class, when we're doing an animation, if you're using cycles render, I would suggest not to go over about 20 samples. In the chessboard, we did 500 samples to make it look really nice, but that took about 5 minutes to render. If we did that in our animation, it'd take about 5 minutes per frame to render, and that's going to take forever. So just keep it grainy if you're in cycles render. Do about 20 samples, and that will be just fine. So if you have all those things right, once it's done rendering the last frame, I've got 75 frames, so once it's done it will just stop, and then you can go to your file location and the video will be in that file location.